Welcome to Going Deep with Brandon Angelo, Matt Waldman. And listen, the RSP's out, so you can find it at mattwaldman.com. But you should definitely check out angeloanalysis.com. And you can find he's got a great website with past prospects. You can get scouting reports and evaluations on quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. Film analysis he's got out right now. You can see stuff on Omarion Hampton and his curvy linear work, or RJ Harvey or Trey Harris. Lots of guys out here that we'll be talking about some a little bit here too. And then his Ascension draft database, where you get like the preliminary draft grades.
We're getting close.
Yeah.
Getting close.
Yeah. So, and you can get a subscription to his site. I highly recommend it. I need to renew. I laughed. You guys are going to probably laugh when I say this, but I got a notice on my I got a notice that my card didn't go through because I had switched bank cards because of fraud alerts. I had to, my bank issued me a new card, so I never updated it. And I was like, "You're gonna lose out on your subscription." And I started dying laughing because I'm like, Brandon and I doing this podcast every couple of weeks, and I'm like, "Oh, I got to get that straightened out." But yeah, this is gonna be a fun time. Brandon had a great idea today about just saying, you know what? Let's let our listeners ask the questions, and we'll go through it. And I think I picked 10 or 11, and we'll try and go through many as we can. What do you say?
That sounds great. Let's do it.
All right, so let's start off with this. If Travis Hunter gets drafted as a wide receiver, is he the 1.01 favorite?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing is if he gets drafted. So I think the number one thing he's going to get drafted probably between 2 and 4, right? I think number 1 is going to be Cam Ward. And then you have the Stefanski-led Browns, Dable and the Giants, Vrabel and the Patriots, assuming there's no trade-ups into those spots. So what's going to end up happening is you're going to get Hunter in a situation where you're not going to really know, no matter where he goes, how much he's going to play receiver, how much he's going to play corner, because this is going to be a really unique situation where you're not going to give these guys, Stefanski, Vrabel, Dable, aren't going to want to give a lot of tells in terms of what his usage is going to be like early on in his career. So when you're picturing that, it's going to be frustrating for someone taking him 101 because you want, honestly, if you draft him 101, you want more of a sure thing. I have Hunter graded as the highest receiver prospect since 2019.
Wow.
I think he is that good at wide receiver. I think he can be a very Justin Jefferson-like in that regard. But what if Justin Jefferson only played 70% of the snaps?
Right.
And that's the stuff that we don't know yet. So for me, I'm like, all right, even if I'm in super flex, I'm taking Genty number 1, 101, and then at 2, then it's like if you're in super flex, you're taking Ward. But then it gets interesting. Like, what do you do? Like, there's a big hodgepodge of guys that you can take at 102, but 101, I would much rather have Genty, even though, let's say, I know Andrew Berry's like, oh my God, I love Travis Hunter. He's all about it. He thinks he's a receiver. Even if he says that, at 101, that's still pretty big risk ticket for sure.
It's a great question, and I love your answers with that. And I had a conversation with Sigmund Bloom earlier today on the couch, and he said, well, if we look at it in a very simplistic way, wide receivers make a lot more money than star cornerbacks.
Right.
And so, it tells you what they value, NFL teams value most. So if you can have a very good wide receiver, and he's my number 2 wide receiver in this class, but
right.
the grade is very strong. It's a very strong grade, a franchise caliber, start immediately grade. So, you look at it from that perspective, and certainly he could have more of an impact that way. And then Bloom brought up another thing that I thought was worthwhile, which was if Mike Vrabel gets him, considering his background and considering what he did as a football player, maybe he's more amenable to letting Travis Hunter show that he can play both sides and not be in a gadget role doing it. Because, to your point, Justin Jefferson, if he was playing a Mecole Hardman role to begin his career, Would he be a 13, 14, 1,500-yard receiver, or would be a 600 to 800-yard receiver who just looks really damn good doing what
Sure.
Nicole Hart, because it's the role that narrowed it down. So
Right.
I just wonder about that with him, and I would agree with you that pre-draft, I just don't think he's first round draftable pre-draft, as because of the risk factor. But
Sure.
after the draft, when we know what's happening here, and we get a little bit of an idea, and we can look at the depth chart, and we can look at the system and what the coach says, he's much less of a gamble. I mean, he still is. There's still a shot that maybe he's 70-30 cornerback, but I could live with that. And if you have multiple first round picks, and you're on a rebuilding team and you're getting some good shots at players, why not take the shot as him as your early first round gamble in that case? But yeah.
Love it. Yeah, that's pretty spot on. I think, what we're just not going to know.
Yeah.
We're not going to know very much until after the NFL draft. Even then, it's going to be probably deep into the summer, close to August, September, where we're going to start to figure out how expansive his offensive role will be. Because you're absolutely right. I think it's $10 million a year. They're looking at the difference between corner and high-end corner, high-end DB. And that's a lot of money.
Yeah. So what would you, just as a follow-up, what is it that you like about Travis Hunter, specifically about his game, that has you that high since 2019 that he's your highest rated receiver?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm just finishing his write-up too for the site, but I think the biggest thing is he just has this uncanny knack of finding the ball and playing it perfectly. Like, there was a play, he was tracking a ball over his shoulder, looks at it, split second, head down, sprints, finds the ball again, basket catches the defender draped on his back. And it's just stuff like that you just don't see very often. And also, too, the movement tools at top of routes and the ability to, this is a unique thing to him, is he knows how defenders are going to play him because he knows how he would play him. And that's a really interesting thing that you can't say about anybody else. But just overall, I think from a build standpoint, from a play speed standpoint, ball skills, in and out of routes, releases the line of scrimmage, everything he does has an A grade to it, and he hasn't been playing the position full time. And that's the really unique part, is he has such a high grade and he's not even a full-time receiver. So I think there's a uniqueness to him that I'm kind of drawn to, and just kind of looking at some of the things that I haven't seen. I've seen him do some things on tape that I haven't seen since I've started. And for me, that's a big draw in terms of the special athlete that he is, whether he plays corner or he plays receiver. This is a potential gold jacket caliber guy.
Yeah.
Like, this is a legitimate, I think the word special is very, very much oversaid, but this is a gold jacket, once in a lifetime potential talent. I think he's that good.
Wow, that's great. And I like how you highlighted the tracking, because when you have that kind of tracking, I can certainly understand why that's an appeal. The only thing that I saw in him that I felt like I wanted him to improve upon was that you're right that he sees the game like a cornerback playing wide receiver, but I did find that he got pinned to the boundary a little more often than I would expect for a guy who sees the game like that. But I think that's more about, sometimes you guess wrong. Sometimes you play it a little bit wrong, and everyone gets pinned to the corner, gets pinned to the boundary. So it's not like an awful thing, and it's an easier thing to overcome. I might have been just a little harder on him with that than maybe I need to. I don't know. We'll find out. But it was the difference between having one of the highest grades I've given to having still probably in the top 10 to top 15 that I've given in the past 5 to 6 years at that position. So it's a small difference, but no, I'm with you, and it's going to be exciting, and I think that that's the thing. If you like gambling on a player, he's a good gamble. It's just that he's a little bit more of a gamble than
Right.
the other guy. So if you're like, forget that mess you guys are talking about pre-draft, we may not recommend it, pre-NFL draft. But if you're just all in on this kid and you won't be dissuaded, play it out, because you'll learn something from it one way or the other. And if you're right, you would hate to let us talk you out of it and
Right.
and then go, I could have had him, but I listened to those two bozos talking me out of it, So just know the risk. That's all I would say. If you're more of a play by the numbers approach, then yeah, wait till the draft. All right, so another wide receiver that was asked was, can you discuss what we like and don't like about Texas Alabama receiver Isaiah Bond? And he's wondering if Bond could be a draft day steal. And then he's got a second question that we'll get to too. But Isaiah Bond, I'll just say this: he wasn't far away from Matthew Golden for me. I conceivably thought that he might end up having a better career than Golden. His acceleration is the most notable of any receiver I've seen in this class. I mean, you see it. And he's a much better route runner. I think he's a good underneath route runner. Sharp breaks, flat breaks, accelerates into the top of his stem really well. Decent pass catcher for sure. And then what he can do after the catch. Now, I have heard from some folks that he's got the personality of a stereotypical high-end wide receiver, which is that he's quick twitch and his personality is a little too tightly wound at times. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it is. To me, the only downside would be, is that true? Are we looking at something where we look at Jermaine Burton, now a year from what happened, and go, are we going to have a receiver like that, or is he more like your typical wide receiver that he might wear out his welcome in 3 to 5 years after a good run with the team and they trade him somewhere else?
Sure.
And it starts anew, and then he wears his welcome out there, and he's had a nice long career of 10, 11 years with 2 or maybe 3 teams, and everyone's like, yeah, he's great to have.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. It's funny because I have him really low.
Okay.
I have a below the 10th percentile grade.
Wow.
Which is crazy. Just considering where reading the RSP.
Yeah,
too.
so what did you dislike about him? That's cool.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was there were a lot of plays down the down where it just seemed like there's a lack of interest.
Okay.
And an effort standpoint, but also too flow of game. If the game wasn't going his way, you felt that.
Okay.
It was kind of like Adonai Mitchell too, at Texas year before.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing. I noted this pretty similar. There's kind of a panic button in evaluations, and that's one of them. It's if the prospect looks disinterested in the fourth quarter of a close game, and they're just not getting the ball. If he's had one catch for 14 yards up until 11 minutes left in the fourth, Bond and Mitchell were guys that you would feel that. And that was for me, it was less about the physical stuff, more about the intangible things that you can kind of pinpoint and see. Because you're absolutely right. Absolute blur of an accelerator. Play speed is very high end. Better than I expected down the field in contested situations. I think he struggled more in the short to intermediate areas. Once you get to that second level and you're coming across the middle, securing the ball. And that was a big one for me, was when things weren't going right, they were going wrong. They were going really poorly for him. And that was something too, can he grow out of it? Absolutely. But that's something too that I noted when you mentioned Jermaine Burton. It was the 33rd team, they were talking about him, and apparently people around the league were saying that he has a similar off the field issue as Jermaine Burton. And we know how bad Jermaine Burton's was.
Yeah.
This past year. And if that's true, then the value of Bond is going to be interesting, because he might fall to the third day. Because originally, like if we had this conversation in August, September, Bond was being mocked in the first round.
Yeah.
Between like 17 and 22 most places, I remember. And now, because of this, obviously the combine wasn't ideal for him, especially with his talking and saying he's going to run 4.2. And with this off the field stuff coming out, some of the concerns about, his on-field demeanor, he could slip to day 3 and then be of value due to the fact that if you're a day 3 pick, you're a developmental traits-based guy. So you're not expected to start. In a situation like that might cause a guy like Bond to zoom out, to understand his flaws, and to correct those and be a heck of a player. So he's talking about a physical trait standpoint. Yeah, he has starter level skill.
Yeah.
It's just the other stuff. Like last year with Jermaine Burton, Javon Baker were the two notables where these are starting caliber players. But the off the field stuff's really dragging them down.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think that's the difference between, say, like how you and I are evaluating guys is that you incorporate a little bit more of the off-field stuff into the equation or on-field of what you see and saying where that's at. And I think that's completely fair. I just choose not to because for my own reasons where I feel like it's harder for me to assess where I'm hearing that from and what kind of value that has. But like what we did share in common is like the fact that he does clap attack some targets. He has lapses with overhand position where he does that. And I think that there are a couple scenarios where the ball is where the ball is located that he can get a little bit crossed up with his attack, and that's really when the target's at shoulder height and away from his frame, and then when he tries to use overhand, so they're overhand position on certain routes. And they're two kind of isolated things that I think he can correct. But you're right, if the attitude isn't good, it doesn't matter, right. And so we'll see how that works. The fascinating thing is, as Bloom brought up today, if we remember Brandon Marshall, a lot of teams were kind of like, I don't know, I want to be around that guy, or we want to have that guy as a part of our deal,
right?
Or even Terrell Owens, with his career. So you have some of that with a lot of receivers in the league, but we'll see if it's, we'll see how teams approach it. And you're right, it's going to be fascinating to find out how teams approach it in the shadow of what happened with Jermaine Burton.
Right.
So all right, the second half of this question, and it kind of bleeds into our third question, is, by the way, can you talk more about Damien Martinez? He also brought up Tahj Brooks, but we'll save that. But Damien Martinez, and then the first question of the first part of the third question was Damien Martinez. Many want to project Omarion Hampton to Denver and the Chargers, but my thought is Martinez in the 4th round is a much better value and fit for these teams. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's funny because the gap between RB2 and RB12 in this class is pretty thin. So what might end up happening is like the floor of a lot of these guys is pretty similar, 2 to 12. So I would much rather take the value of a Martinez in the 4th than have to draft Hampton, which likely at this point top 25, top 32 pick, 5 first rounder, late first rounder. But with Martinez, I can wait till the 4th round.
Yeah.
Like I can get a guy like him, I can get Brooks. Like that's a much better value because you're able to fill out your roster. There's that large of a difference between a Hampton and a Martinez to where 2 rounds plus of draft capital is going away. No, there's not. So I'd much rather have Martinez. I think in terms of fit, in terms of like win now, like ready to go start a game, Martinez might even be better at that in that sense. There's some things that Hampton needs to clean up. I think he's really dependable down to down, doesn't lose yardage, but the second level decision making and the ability to kind of slow that internal clock and make sound decisions, Martinez is further along than Hampton is.
Yeah.
Hampton's going to have rookie moments there where Martinez, you're going to get super high in moments. Probably not, but you're not going to get those second level mistakes that you're going to have with Hampton. So that's not worth the first rounder.
No, I think I totally agree. I mean, Martinez, I think right now is as good or better of a pass protector. I think he's an underrated receiver in the check down game, as an outlet option. He has good hand-eye coordination. And as a runner, yeah, he's someone that breaks tackles, runs through contact, pushes piles, but he has underrated smooth accelerator. And if you watch him at Oregon State, you can watch him on a lot of outside zone where you go, oh, okay, there's that gear. And at Miami, you see some of that too, but usually he's had to run through a few people like a snow plow.
Right.
In a
lot less outside zone too at Miami than at Oregon State.
Yeah, at Oregon State, you saw that gear. And you go, okay, there's a little bit more of that there. Whereas with Omarion Hampton, my concern is it's not a major one, but there were a lot. The plays where he has those big runs seem to be places where he has a nice long runway to get up to full speed, and then he's pulling away from the secondary. But more often than not, when he didn't have that clean second level to build up speed, he wasn't able to beat those guys because his acceleration, I'd say his acceleration is high-end committee level, whereas his top speed is low-end elite level. And so you're not going to be able to access that elite speed unless you've got a lot of space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really interesting. I think it's funny because he can't play as fast because he can't process as fast. That's why I think he's, his acceleration capability does not match the combine.
No.
Which is a big tell of he can't play as fast as he processes because he really can't process information that well at the second level. Initial acceleration is good. Early acceleration is not. And that's a big tell of there's a lot of question marks popping up when he hits the second level with backers. And that's a big one. And I think, too, that's a lot of coaching. I think, to coaching scheme. In 24, the Tar Heels offensive line wasn't as good. So it's a little bit harder on that sense, but also too, that's a part of growing, right? If he fixes that, he's a Pro Bowl caliber guy.
Sure.
But that's a big one going into the league for him is, if a team is investing a top 25, 30 pick in Omarion Hampton, they're dead set on fixing it.
Sean Payton isn't going to be patient with that, probably.
No. You better be ready. I'll be shocked if Payton drafts a Hampton.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be more so a Henderson.
Yep.
Or you take a stab in the third, like a Brashard Smith.
Yeah.
Because I think he likes Estime. I think he Estime played well at times last year.
Yeah.
But I think, too, he's really looking for that. Looking for the Camaro of that offense. Looking for the guy as a weapon in the pass game. And that's just not Hampton.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I would say, I bet that Martinez falls to the 5th round or the 6th round. I think that analysts who've played football or have done scouting for a while like Martinez more than the general media and that teams will. Because the people I've talked to like him and would say I like him more than Omarion Hampton in some ways would be Dan Hatman of the Scouting Academy, who scouted for the Giants and Eagles. He liked Martinez a lot too. Me, I think Matt. What's Matt's name? Matt from ESPN, the former
Miller?
Bears. No, the former safety in the NFL who used to.
Oh, Matt Bowen.
Matt Bowen, yeah. Matt Bowen seems to like Martinez, at least from what I've seen. So yeah,
he's steady.
Yes.
That's the thing is is the high end percentile stuff there, as with Hampton? Probably not.
No.
Right? I think it's different there. I think Hampton has a ton of upside to be a Pro Bowl caliber dude. Martinez can be a starter.
Yeah.
Like at any point in his career. And that's the difference, is he's going to be serviceable from day one.
And maybe
but if you draft Hampton in the first round, you're making him serviceable from day one. There's no choice.
Yeah, exactly. So you have more bust potential with Hampton early on for sure. Whereas Martinez, I feel like 8 years from now we might go, he's the best back from this class just because he made it this long and he's been giving us the most consistent production. Kind of like I compared him to Ryan Grant, like the the Packers.
Packer, yeah,
just kind of like he's somewhere between Ryan Grant and Ryan Matthews in terms of abilities. Like
sure.
He's not as explosive as Matthews was, but he's more reliable and he's got more of that Grant reliability. So,
yeah, Adam is like a James Conner type guy.
Yeah,
where it's like he's just down to down. Like you don't want to take him off the field because he's not going to make mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. So all right, so I guess folks want more Tahj Brooks, from that standpoint. So is he someone that fits into that for you too? Would you rather have Omarion Hampton in that case, or would you say Tahj Brooks later on in the 5th or 6th round, or even as an undrafted free agent? What about those scenarios? 5th or 6th round, or 7th and undrafted free agent? What does that change your idea of what you do with him as a fantasy GM?
Yeah, like if I'm in two realms, if I'm a real GM, I'm just taking. There's a lot of backs I want in the 5th and 6th round this year, and Brooks is one of those.
Yeah,
I have Brooks above a 70th percentile grade. Like I think he's a starting caliber player.
Yeah.
The issue is going to be is our NFL team's going to shy away from not having a super elite skill. Like Hampton and Brooks are in the realm of they're good to very good in a bunch of different areas, but they're not great at something that is noteworthy, right? And that's easily seen on the surface level. So that's a tough one. It's like if you're a fantasy GM, if you look at it from the sense of points per game, how many points per game on average is each round produce? The first rounders, I've looked at my data, but it was like 15 and a half to 16 and a half points a game. Versus your 5th, 6th rounders, on average 6.5 to 7.5 points a game. So you're talking about an RB1 versus RB50,
right?
RB45 on average, and that's tough because you can have Tahj Brooks going to Detroit. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, hope for an injury, which you don't really want to hope for.
Right? Exactly. You go to Martinez goes to Minnesota. They just signed Jordan Mason. They have Aaron Jones. Like that's the tough thing is you bring either of those guys to Green Bay. Yeah. It's like that's the thing it's tough because the landscape might dictate early career success.
But then Tahj Brooks to Cleveland, and
suddenly we have something.
Okay.
Then we have something. It was like, 4 or 5 years ago, James Robinson to Jacksonville, right when Leonard Fournette gets released.
Yeah.
And then, it's the James Robinson show. And Raheem Armstead, I think, got injured in camp. Then there you go. James Robinson's a Pro Bowler. And then I think that could be, too, like what we see with some of these guys where, they have smaller or no role to begin, and then a couple injuries happen, and then we have them pegged as guys who are starters. They end up playing well.
Yeah. It's going to be a disappointing draft for fantasy GMs relative to the talent that this class has. And I think that's what we need to keep warning people about is that if you're drafting, this is the problem with this draft class, is that there are good wide receivers in this class, but it may not be as stocked at like 2023's class was, or even 2022's class. There's going to be some good ones at the top, but beyond like the first 5 or 6, there are guys that could really be good, but there's a big group of guys who've like I put it this way: a big group of guys who've developed a lot of tools in their toolbox, but they're not masters at those tools. So whereas
Right.
like maybe in yesteryear you had some stars who like had 3 tools in their toolbox, but they could use those 3 tools better than a lot of these guys can use 8. So
Sure.
it may be like that. So vesting in wide receivers is usually the smart approach. Investing in quarterbacks is usually the smart approach with a lot
Right.
of leagues. But this year, maybe the approach is that if you're going to do running backs, to me, the approach might be trade out to 26 and 27 picks and
Right.
get higher picks. But
Right.
if you're only 1 or 2 running backs away, this might be the draft to really stockpile running back and hope you hit on one,
Yeah.
and then just forget receiver and tight end and quarterback if all you need is that 1 or 2 running backs to hit. If you need depth elsewhere, you can pick your spots with the tight end. You can pick your spots with wide receiver early. And then I would say after the second round or the second round on, then just load up on running backs if you want to take a shot on somebody else early.
Right.
Or you can do rounds 3 through 5 straight up running back, because some of these guys, Damien Martinez, like if he's a 6th-round pick, you might get, like you said, you might get him in the 4th round of a fantasy draft. Whereas
Right.
2 years ago, or last year, you would have looked at him and gone, he might have been a top 5 back in this class last year.
Right. No, 100%. And that's the interesting part about this current landscape is you're going to get guys pushed down the NFL draft. There's going to be guys who are, 3rd-round talents that go in the 6th. And that's the thing, is you got to peg those guys. You got to know that. And then when you do your rookie drafts, those are the guys you draft in the 4th round where no one wants a 6th-round running back. But these are the guys that can start potentially.
Yeah.
Whether it's at their current stop or their next stop in the near future, those are guys that can take over a room potential.
So, all right, what's a player that you're afraid you're too bullish on right now? And we have it's like a Chicago flavor, bullish and bearish, so they
Sure.
were, so which
Neither very good, but I would probably say Trey Harris.
Okay.
And I'm like as an 85th percentile grade. I think he's a very good player. I think he's pretty similar to Allen Robinson II. But the reason why I think too bullish might be the outcome is the injuries. 2 season-ending injuries is kind of hard to stomach when you're still developing skill at the position.
Right.
I think from a trait standpoint, from a metric standpoint, he really stands out. But we've seen it in years past, whether you're a 1st-rounder or a 2nd-rounder, 3rd-rounder, if you have a chance to start and you get hurt in training camp or you get hurt in OTAs or preseason, that is a huge hit to your development. I remember when Jalen Reagor got hurt in his first camp with the Eagles. And he just, I remember the reports where he was lighting it up. I mean, that one-handed catch and it was a joint practice, whatever. He's killing it. He's confident. Gets hurt. It just never looks the same after that. He's all out of sorts. Can't develop. And that's where like the motor learning part of the position really pops up, because, from like a motor learning perspective, if you're a collegiate athlete, it's a team, right? You're the best player on the field. Everything is flowing through you. Your 1st-round draft pick, 2nd-round draft pick, potentially at receiver. But you go to the NFL, and there's other guys talented as you, if not more so, and you have to learn how to play a role.
Yeah.
And that's jarring in general. But then you get hurt on top of that, and someone else is playing the role you're supposed to play, probably better than you, because you haven't been playing that role very long. So what do?
Yeah.
That's the tough part. And some guys can't ever come back from that, right? Jalen Reagor is one of them. Corey Coleman in years past. Like, just mentally, emotionally, from a confidence perspective, just can't recover. And so that's what I fear with Trey Harris is the biggest predictor of future injury is past injury. He's had 2 significant enough ones to be season enders. So then for him, it's going to be, if that happens early career, then it's going to be an even bigger uphill climb to being the player that I think he could be.
No, yeah.
How about you?
It's Kelly Kyrie out of Mississippi State, who
Okay.
I have rated very highly. But you know, the thing is I feel like I'm standing alone. I'm like a polar bear on an ice floe that, you know,
Sure.
and everything's melted around me. But that's what sometimes you find out when you're doing these evaluations and you're not really keeping track of what other people think. Sometimes you find yourself standing alone on a player. And I like his route running, and I love how he tracks the football. And I think that he has good speed from what I saw and from what I could measure. But again, he's probably going to be an undrafted free agent. So, you know, on a talent perspective, I can say I like what I see, and I think that if he's given an opportunity to really compete, maybe he could earn his way into that. But based on draft capital, the odds are pretty low. So, you know, and considering that there are a lot of people out there who got a chance to watch his tape probably, and if they didn't see enough that they were even remotely enthusiastic enough for him to get a combine invite,
Right.
that's an interesting fact right there, a little factoid right there that you go, huh, okay, well, I might be alone on that front. So
Sure.
that's one of them. How about someone that you feel like you're too bearish on?
Oof. Too bearish. I'm going to say Bashil Tootin,
Okay.
Virginia Tech. Pretty low on him, below 50th percentile in terms of prospect grade. And the consistency all around is a big one. From the fumbles to stuff rate, just not being able to recognize just simple keys and just not being in phase with what the run calls. But he's a big play threat. Like, guys like that can develop in the right system and be home run hitters and be difference makers. And that's the thing, too. If, like, he goes to, let's say, the San Francisco 49ers, where he's learning behind a Christian McCaffrey, learning the pace and tempo of runs in probably one of the best outside zone masterminds, Shanahan, then that changes things. So that's a big one for me. It's the physical measurables are there, but like the perceptual cognitive stuff, the fumbles, all that isn't. But if that's cleaned up, then you have a potential dynamic weapon at the position.
I love how you framed it, because really, from my perspective, I would say you're not too bearish on him at all. You're realistic about the potential opportunity that could happen there if he winds up with Kyle and Emperor Palpatine up at the top of the press box.
Sure.
You know, who is the original master of the wide zone attack. So yeah, if he gets to develop in that frame standpoint, there are a lot of backs I would look at and go, that's great, because you saw what happened to Brock Purdy as a quarterback in that environment.
Right.
It accelerated his ability. It's like you're playing with the wrecking crew of studio musicians as a young musician, and you're getting an opportunity to play with those guys. You're going to level up fast, you know, if you have any talent. And so that could very well be the case. Now, so yeah, I like that. But the fumbles, you're right. I mean, like the RSP, I did a study on the RSP for the past 6 years of running backs and ball security last year, and I found that the past 6 years, if you fell below a certain threshold that Bashil Tootin fell well below it, only 10% of all the running backs that I've evaluated during that 6-year period delivered even a season of top 24 fantasy production. and I think it was 3% of them only were the only 3% of them reached top 12 or top
Right.
10. So it's, now I would bet if I go back and look that I bet the ones who were that 30% and that 10% were probably highly rated players. That probably were able to shore up what they did. So that's probably what I'm going to look into before. So, but I'm with you on that. I would say I'm a little too I think I'm too bearish on a few players, but I'll give a couple quick ones and then get into a longer one. But I would say Isaiah Nayor is a quick hitter that I feel like I didn't get a chance to see him run in the open field in traffic. I watched just about every catch that he's had from Wyoming to Texas to Texas he didn't even play, but Wyoming to Nebraska. And I did see some Texas film, come to think of it, to those three places. And I did not see any plays where he had to really show patience and decision-making and creativity where other than just maybe veering away from players he was running away from in wide open space because of the role that he had. So I couldn't really judge his vision and elusiveness on a level that I would be able to judge other receivers. And so he could have been much higher on my board if I had seen him prove that he could do some of those things. So that's one. I would say Mario Anderson Jr., the Memphis running back, I feel like I'm a little bit more bearish on, only because he didn't get to go to the combine. But when I watched him at South Carolina, he was outrunning cornerbacks and defensive and safeties, SEC defenders who had angles on him in the open field, and was showing a burst and speed. And looking at the miles per hour that I saw on him, it was promising enough that the combine might have closed off the circle in a good way for me to go, yeah, legitimately has this level of speed. So I had to kind of underestimate where he might actually be to play it safe. And he's a top 15, but he's 15th on my board, which is kind of high compared to everybody else, but I really liked him. And I'll say the guy that I'm probably feel like I'm more bearish on than I need to be is Jalen Milroe. And I have Milroe number 2 on my board, on my quarterback board. But I have not seen a quarterback in this class process the field the way that Milroe has in certain situations that to me matter. And I think that I could have probably been a little bit. I feel like there were opportunities to me maybe go in more the positive side of the tier in decision making and in certain accuracy tiers, but I played it a little bit more conservative with him, and because I felt like that the sample size was a little lower for me to like get too positive on the accuracy tier stuff, because if he was a little different on 2 of the accuracy tiers, he would have easily been my number 1 quarterback in this class. And I know that he's going to be seen as a bit of a project, and it's probably going to take him a little bit more time. But I mean, I based on what the NFL is going to afford him to be. But I don't know. I think he's the quarterback I want in this class, even if he's my number 2 guy. I'm probably going to be taking him ahead of Cam Ward. Not ahead of, but I'll be taking him instead of Cam Ward. I won't even be considering Ward. I'll be waiting like 3rd, 4th round on Hunter, 5th round on Hunter. I mean, not Hunter, on Milroe, if he falls that far. And just go, I'll take the value on that and give that a go. So those are 3 players I feel like I'm a little bearish on.
I love that. And Milroe's an interesting one too, because I think for him, I don't think he's as far behind as people are.
No.
And I think a lot of it's to the maturity of the kid is really important. Because when you look at like an Anthony Richardson and Jalen Milroe, Anthony Richardson from like a physical standpoint and playing the position is not bad.
No.
It's just the other stuff. Can't prepare for the game. Jalen Milroe, on all accounts, that is a really strong point of his.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, I liken it to Malik Willis. Malik Willis went to the worst situation possible, was thrown into the fire, did not perform well, and then when he goes to LaFleur in Green Bay, he looks great.
Yeah.
He looks capable. But what if he would have been able to develop that from the start? What would we see?
Yes.
I think what we would see is Jalen Milroe.
Yes, I agree. That's where
and that I think is where Milroe is. And I think a good situation for him would be Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Because I think he's just a better processor than a Justin Fields was last year. And can learn behind Aaron Rodgers, potentially.
Yeah.
Who is one of the better quarterbacks, one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game.
Right.
So I think, getting to sit for a year and then be the guy, if that's the case, he's going to light it up. And he is a talented kid. And he has a lot of capabilities that you just can't teach. And he gives you an extra element in your run game, an extra player to account for. And that is something in this day and age that's pretty impactful.
Love it. So some thought, he wants, one of our questions is rough thoughts on these less heralded prospects. Do we think they'll be fantasy relevant? Are we targeting them late in dynasty drafts? So how about we start with, are we targeting these guys late in dynasty drafts because that would mean that we think they could be fantasy relevant within a span of 3 years, I would say, if we're going to be most generous, right? All right, first up, Jacory Croskey-Merritt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Kind of an aspiring Aaron Jones type with maybe not quite the receiving chops, but creative and quick.
Movement tools are definitely there, for sure.
Tahj Brooks, I think we already covered pretty well.
100%.
All right, Jordan James, Oregon.
Yes. But it depends where he goes. That's a big it depends for me.
I get it because he's he's a smart runner. He kind of combines the tools of guys like Trevor Etienne and some of the scat backs in his class, but he's not quite as explosive, but he's a little more consistent and a little bit more useful between the tackles.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you go, do I really want a back who's 208 to 210 be my guy running between the tackles when he doesn't have that stuff. And he doesn't have that kind of speed that the other guys have. So really good player, but he's that player that I feel like he's gonna clog he could, like what you're saying, he could clog your roster, and then just as you get rid of him, he has that Tim Hightower year because somebody got hurt, and now he's like worth it. But then
he's capable, like he's a capable player.
Yeah,
just echo what you said. It's just he's not what teams are going to be looking for in this class.
Yeah. So now we get some receivers. Look at that. We haven't talked about many of them in a while. Elijhah Badger, Florida receiver.
Yeah, absolutely. Talented kid.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Very good after the catch. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Good athlete, and he can continue to grow. Imagine him in a Rams-like offense with those routes working across the field.
In breakers, yep.
Yeah, very good stuff. All right, my favorite, Konata Mumpfield.
I'm gonna say yes, just so you don't boot me off. But yeah, no, for sure. No, I think with Mumpfield, he's one of the better route runners in the cycle. I think in the right situation, we can see a Jalen Coker type, rookie year in the right situation. Things have to shake right for a guy like that, obviously. But yeah, he's a yes.
Yeah, I'll add some reality to it, since obviously, because I think you're right that it depends. But I would say that probably late round, or you can wait until free agency and get them on expanded deep rosters where you don't have to use a draft pick. Probably in that range, but I agree with you that it could shake out that way. But to quell the excitement level that I had for him earlier, I think, it depends on your league situation. Deeper leagues, sure. Shallower leagues, just wait until you can have as many guys as you want preseason, and then you can cut them if it doesn't show up. KeAndre Lambert Smith. Me
No.
neither. Me neither. Like, I think he's that guy you could pick up off your waiver wire and go,
Right.
could he be Kendrick Bourne one day? Maybe. Maybe, but probably not. Wait and see. Let him prove it.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Jaylin Lane.
Talented kid. I mean, really, like, physically, yeah, he has traits.
Okay. Yeah, I would say you're probably going to have to if you want to do it. I would say I don't like how he catches the football, and I have concerns about that. But at the same time, if you have the expectation of, say, a Mecole Hardman type of role, then and he surprises you, then you're okay. But if you're thinking you have the expectation of being the same expectation you had for Mecole Hardman, many of you, when he got drafted by the Chiefs, then I would say just don't chase that anymore. Okay. So over the years, watching tape and evaluating offensive skill players, have you guys formed any opinions or insights on non-fantasy related players? Preferences or valuable traits for positions like cornerback, safety, linebacker, edge, and offensive lineman?
Oof. Okay, I'll be pretty brief. I think the biggest thing I've learned, let's say on the defensive side of the ball, is the best defensive players are always staying in phase.
Yeah.
There's only a deviation if their hand is forced. Right? They're always staying technically sound. They're not breaking away too early. Like, they're really just staying in phase with what the play is giving them and not just guessing. Right? And that's a really big one, I think, for me.
I like that. I would say what I learned early on for like edge players when I was way back when I remember writing a piece about how I like Zadarius Smith over his teammate Bud Dupree. And I think it's that I like technically sound guys who have that. Edge players remind me of wide receivers because they use a lot of the same moves off the line of scrimmage in some regards as wide receivers do. So the ability to create, to set up defenders and have multiple tools and do it within the scheme where they're not, again, knowing when to take the chance and when not to take the chance. So I would say that's what I learned from that standpoint. I would say offensive linemen, I kind of knew pretty much off the bat that I would need a lot more time, so I would probably defer to a Brandon Thorne as someone who would be a great authority in the space to talk about offensive linemen. And Lance Zierlein. I mean, Lance Zierlein's dad was the offensive line coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Arizona Cardinals. And, Lance is a good guy for that. So, all right. So somebody was very excited about the fact that we're doing this and Brandon's idea and said, oh, man, I love this. I know you've both been knee-deep in film study, but I'd love to ask if you could build a team of offense out of your top players you've ever scouted. Who would they be? We could go, let's go 2 deep at quarterback,
Okay.
4 deep at wide receiver, 3 deep at running back, and 2 deep at tight end. Does that make sense?
Okay.
We'll start
Yeah.
2 deep at quarterback. Who would your 2 quarterbacks be?
Okay. In terms of I'll make it easy, just in terms of grade. Grade. Caleb Williams and Bryce Young.
I love it.
All right, go ahead.
Obviously, I'm going to go Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson.
Okay.
So I was a little
Love
bit.
that.
I've been doing that for a little while. Wide receiver, our top. Did we say top 4? Top 4.
Top 4. Okay.
Yeah.
I had Travis Hunter, Malik Neighbors, in no order, Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, and Marvin Harrison Jr.
Love it. I would definitely add Jamar Chase and Malik Neighbors. Absolutely. I could joke Hakeem Butler and say, but I'm not. But I would substitute based on grade. I would substitute probably those 2 guys, and probably would add in Justin Jefferson.
Love it.
from that standpoint, and probably it would be between Marvin Harrison and Cooper Kupp.
Okay.
Probably from those ranges. All right, running back top 3.
Okay. Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs.
Love it. I would probably say Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, and I'm gonna put Ashton Jonty in there. Why not? I'm gonna put. I'll go ahead and put Ashton Jonty and take a chance.
Love it.
All right, tight end, 2 tight ends.
Oh man, Brock Bowers and Kyle Pitts.
Love it.
Kyle Pitts.
That's all right. It's all right. I would probably say definitely Brock Bowers, and then it's not going to be a fun one to say, but on the field he was unbelievable. Aaron Hernandez.
Yeah.
I was, but not knowing what was his life and what was going on in his tortured life and what was going on the field, he was absolutely unbelievable to watch, and one of my favorite tight ends I ever evaluated in terms of just purely on the field. All right. So can y'all talk about the difference between Luther Burden's 2023 and 2024 season? I know Matt has him ranked as wide receiver 1, but how much should we account for the drop-off and evaluating him for future success? Were there other profiles similar to Burden that went on to be successful?
It's a great question. I think the difference I saw from 23 to 24, you saw this late in 23 as well, was they understood what they were doing with Burden in terms of route concepts. And it was a pretty bland offense.
Yeah.
Right. And that was part of it. And there's not really another even middle tier playmaker, in my opinion. And that really hurts a guy like Burden, because with his post-catch skill set and ability to win the ball, like, you need somebody else at least to take some attention away.
Yeah.
And that was a big one, is he didn't have that at all in 24, more so than 23. But yeah, I mean, that was a big one for me, was just the lack of creativity in terms of an offense, because they didn't really have another playmaker. But that's my big one, is that's something you see, because the talent's there. I mean, he's a top receiver in this class in 3 years. Absolutely. Could definitely see it.
I'd have to think about it a little bit more in terms of similar profiles. But
yeah, that I don't know.
Yeah, I would say, if I can have a little latitude with similar, I'd say Jamar Chase didn't play his final season so that he could train, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, well, a year off from college football is going to be a big deal. We don't know if he's really going to be all that in a bag of chips." So there was that, and I remember going, "No, don't worry about that. This dude's training to be an NFL player." And after watching him 2 years at LSU, it was like, this dude's playing with people right now with technique. That's an example. Another one who was kind of banged up and had a fantastic earlier career was Rashad Bateman. And then he got COVID and he lost a ton of weight, and then came back and played at a lower weight and was not as successful. And Tyler Johnson was kind of carrying the load.
I remember that.
Yeah. And so, it's taken a little bit for Bateman to get the value he had, but the Ravens doubled down on him at the beginning of this year.
No, they liked him. I mean, I liked him a lot.
Me too.
I mean, it was just COVID and the injuries.
Yeah.
I mean, brutal. But I mean, now he's a good player. I mean, I don't think he's going to be, the potential of what he was, of being a potential franchise changer. Right. But yeah, it's a tough one. That's a good pull.
Yeah. So, I mean, from that perspective, those are guys that are considered. You could say Chris Carter, way back in the day, as someone who was talented, but maybe at Ohio State down the line that there were some questions there. Or Randy Moss,
Sure.
Randy Moss had a great year at Marshall. But I'll put it this way. Burden, to me, the way he tracks a football and the way he can work himself open in scenarios that a lot of receivers don't do as well as him downfield. He's very adept at doing what Cooper Kupp and Lad McConkey showed last year with Herbert, which is in the red zone or downfield, I can make bait the defender in one direction and work myself open and be on the same page with my quarterback. And I think it's only going to show up in a more magnified, positive way in the NFL versus Brady Cook.
Yeah.
Okay. So, do you think Jaden Higgins of Iowa State can play on the outside, or is he really only going to be successful in the slot?
Yeah, I think he can play inside and out. I think he has the movement tools to play inside and out. The only thing I don't know is the caliber of defender he's going to be facing is so much higher.
Yeah.
And from an athletic standpoint, from a technique standpoint, just from a cognitive understanding, higher. That's tough. I mean, that's the thing we don't know with Higgins because he's on the service level a really good athlete, but is he going to be able to match the athleticism of some of the best athletes in the world who are playing corner on the outside? And that's something I don't know. I think he's a better inside-out guy, kind of like we saw Cedric Tillman in the middle of this year before he got his concussion. Was awesome when they put him in the slot. Awesome. And I think that's where I think he can win a little bit easier earlier on in his career, and then as he gains confidence, bump him outside.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that's a great analysis with it because when you watched him, there were plays where he looked quick-footed and he understood what he was doing and he has technique and he'd get open outside. And then there were plays where you'd watch him and he looked like he was stuck in mud. And a lot of that was probably processing information about how somebody was playing him and how to work around that and not being sure of how to play it. Another guy we could compare to it on a higher level might even be Drake London getting stuck inside this year and having a monster year as an inside-out receiver who can play outside well, but like he certainly fit a nice role for Atlanta when they put him inside. So I agree. I think that he's probably better off to begin with as an inside guy, and then can prove that he's outside. And if he's not, I think he'll be good enough to be a good one on the inside.
Love that.
All right. So final question.
Awesome.
Our reader has, our listener has the 1.02, 1.03, and 1.04 in a dynasty rookie draft, and he's asking Judkins versus Trayvon Henderson versus Omarion Hampton, and he'd like to know ceiling, floor, and magnitude of range of outcomes for these guys.
Oh gosh, okay. I think Trayvon Henderson, from like a fantasy standpoint, has probably the highest range of outcomes because he profiles as the one who's going to catch the most balls out of that grouping. I think the floor is probably lowest for a guy like Hampton if he doesn't fix some of the second level stuff. I think he was the most consistent down to down, didn't lose yardage, but you're playing at North Carolina. It's very different than playing in the NFL. So that's a different part of it. Judkins, I think, might be the most steady. I know what his role is going to be. He's going to be a great B back in the NFL. Who I think, too, if he learns to play the game a little bit slower, he plays the game like a Tasmanian devil.
Yeah.
He can really start to add to his skill set as a receiver. And I think he has the movement tools to run angle and option routes, to be a more multi-dimensional wide receiver. We saw the movement tools at Ole Miss more than Ohio State.
Yes.
And if that kind of comes back, for whatever reason, that wasn't prevalent in Ohio State, but it's here or there. I mean, if that comes back, I think he has just a high ceiling as a guy like Henderson does. And his floor is nice too. But I mean, if you're drafting today and you're saying I pick between these three guys at the 102, I'm probably going to say Henderson. I think his role is going to be pretty clear from day one. And he has nice upside as well because he's a good pass protector. Might see the field for all three downs in a specific offense.
I agree with all of that. I mean, because even watching the Judkins, you saw a couple plays in the playoffs where Judkins ran angle routes and really showed some good skill at the top of the stem. But he's in an offense where they used him more as the grinder. If they put him outside, they ran toss or option toss of some sort to him, where you didn't get a chance to really see him set things up. It was just kind of easy, relatively so. And at Ole Miss, that was where more spread looks against defensive looks, where he had to be more creative, and you could see that burst that was there from that. I like Judkins more as a talent in terms of ways that you can use him and build off of that. But from a fantasy perspective, I think Brandon's dead on that really what Henderson's role is going to be, and the upside of that role is more receptions, whereas Judkins' role is more variable. He could end up being a third running back that eventually becomes the B back in the number 2 role, and he has that David Montgomery kind of ascension into that role where you're like, if I'm patient, Judkins could probably be just as good and maybe have a longer career than Henderson. But if I'm looking for instant impact, Henderson's probably going to be a better option.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, it's tough because guys in a role like Hampton and Judkins, touch count might be high, but also too, if you get an offense that's not in the little red zone very often, it's gonna be hard to capitalize because you're not gonna see a big boon of receptions like Henderson will. So that's another tough one as well.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'll tell you what isn't tough. Go check out Angelo Analysis, angeloanalysis.com, and you can subscribe to his rookie guide. You have the 4-minute podcast, film charting, post-draft landing spot breakdowns, ascension grading system. You can subscribe by week, by month, or by year. It's a great deal. It's a great product. Highly recommend it at angeloanalysis.com.
And go buy the RSP.
20 years,
Go
folks.
buy it. Go buy it. 20 years.
20 years.
20 years. I mean, it's an incredible product. I'm going to be a lifelong subscriber as I was the first time a couple of years ago. But if you haven't bought it, just stop what you're doing. Stop listening to this right now and go do it, because you're not going to be able to put it down for sure.
Well, I appreciate it. You can go to mattwaldman.com and get it there. And if you have any questions or difficulties, just email me. I'll get back to you usually within 24 hours, and we'll get things straightened out for you. I haven't had too many problems this year or in the past several years. Really, we never really have. But it's just I've maybe had 2 questions that I've had to deal with in the past couple of days.
Awesome.
So it's nice, and I appreciate y'all. And we had loved that you guys. There were more questions, but Brandon's probably going to answer them.
I'll put them in the newsletter. I'll put them in the newsletter, because these are all. I mean, we've gotten probably 5 or 6 more that just came in. But I mean, I'll put them in the newsletter. I'll put them out on the site. We'll toss a link up and we'll hit it
for sure. And then So it's great. The fact that that we have these kind of listeners to ask these types of questions. Yeah, we're very fortunate. So thank you again. And you guys have a great night, and appreciate Brandon. I think he's playing a little hurt today, but we'll go from there. So feel better. Take care.